Man, 2024 is flying by. It is the 12th day of June, and it is definitely going by in quickness and with speed and all along those lines. So a lot of things are happening in the world, and we'll be talking about that. And of course, we've got another special guest that'll be talking about his family and his family history in a part of the world that a lot of people pay attention to and have been paying attention to lately. But a lot of times we don't understand necessarily the history the way that we should. But before we get to that, let me talk to you about some of the news items that are going on. Apparently, Blinken is still trying to negotiate that Israel and Hamas ceasefire, and apparently some Hamas amendments to the hostage deal are being said, according to Blinken, as being not workable. So definitely, it looks like they are trying to seek some amendments to the Israel proposed ceasefire deal. But like I said, it looks like there is still some wrinkles in the plan, and we'll see how this all goes. Apparently, the Qatari prime minister has expressed support for the hostage deal. So that is something that is good and all in that space. We also know that one of our guests that is regularly on the show, or one of our panelists, oftentimes talks about AI, that being Rick Rosner. But apparently, Pope Francis will be speaking about AI at the G7 summit, because the G7 summit is going to take place as well. And a lot of people are following attention to that and all along those lines, as apparently Biden's alliance building, it will be tested by Trump at home and abroad. And it definitely looks like Biden is heading to Italy to meet with the G7 allies. And some of them are nervous about world politics, nervous about what's going on in electoral politics, and nervous just in general. So we'll see how things are going in that space as well. So a lot of folks will be paying attention to that. And of course, more than 1.5 million foreign Muslims are to arrive in Mecca for their annual Hajj pilgrimage. So that is something that is going on, and that will be taking place again this year. Despite all of the conflicts that are going on in the Middle East, there will still be a number of folks coming from around the world to celebrate that particular religious event, and all in that space. So a lot of people will be paying attention to that as well. And apparently, Pope Francis has been accused of using a homophobic slur once again. So this is definitely prompted another Vatican apology. So that is something that is going on as well. Like I said, the Pope will also be speaking about AI later as well. And it looks like U.S. submarine hunters are on the converge of a Russian flotilla off of Florida, because, as is often the case, Russian ships are set to arrive in Cuba as those Cold War allies strengthen their ties. So it looks like the Russian warships and aircraft are entering the Caribbean for a military exercise with their Cuban friends, and all along those lines. So it does look like that is being kept a watchful eye by some of the folks there in Washington as well. So that is something that folks will be paying attention to, in addition to other things that are going on in the world. Of course, a lot of people in the U.S. are paying attention to what happened on yesterday, because it does look like a guilty verdict was put out in there, and all along those lines. So Hunter Biden was found guilty of 3 charges, and it looks like now he will just be waiting for the sentencing, and just like Trump will be waiting for his sentencing. So that is something that is going on as well. Apparently, Elon Musk waved off the Hunter Biden verdict and says the more serious crime is taking bribes. So definitely that is something that is going on, as well as people are still trading barbs as we're getting ready for the November elections. And of course, people are trying to play to their base as well. So definitely a lot of people are paying attention to that also. And the Southern Baptists will to decide whether to formally ban churches with women pastors. So that is a vote that is about to come down, and they'll be thinking about whether they're going to expel members that have women pastors. So that is something that a lot of people are going to be paying attention to as well. And It looks like the Senate has found that residential treatment centers are putting profits over care. So it does look like that is something else that is in the news as federal lawmakers are set to hear from an investigation of abuses at youth residential facilities. So a lot of people are paying attention to that. And there is a gentleman that a lot of folks are very much familiar with. He's getting up there in age, but linguist and activist Noam Chomsky has been hospitalized in his wife's native country of Brazil, but he is at the age of 95. But a lot of people that are scholars have definitely read his work and all in that space. And of course, there is some elections that are taking place that'll even impact the November elections. But Sam Brown wins the Nevada GOP Senate race, and he'll be facing Rosen or Jackie Rosen in November. So Jackie Rosen swiftly scored the Nevada Democratic Senate nod ahead of the toss-up election. So we do know that Nevada, along with North Carolina and Pennsylvania and other states, are considered swing states that are very important to determining who will be the president and all in that space. So a lot of people are paying attention to how things are going in that space as well. And apparently the GOP averted the disaster in Ohio. So there is definitely some things that are going on in that space as well, as House voters tapped Roll as the person for the House vacancy, and definitely that boosted the GOP's majority. So it does look like that is something that is still going on as well. I'm going to get to some news that my guest may be interested in, and then I'll bring him in and we'll have a conversation as well, because I did see something that involved a part of the world that he is very much familiar with and all in that space. So apparently Hungary has agreed not to veto NATO's deepening support for Ukraine. So that is something that they are doing. And of course, there is exchanges that will be part of that as well. So definitely looks like Viktor Orban will not be vetoing that in that space. So like I said, that's just some of the news items. We may get to other items as well, but I'm going to bring in my guests and all in that space. So we've got Les with me, and we're going to bring him in and learn all about his family history and all along those lines. So Les, I know we talked a couple of days ago and you were telling me about this book, 12 Bells of Freedom, and even how it parallels somewhat to things that are going on today as well. So I'm imagining that as a person of Hungarian descent, and some people have still been following even before the Russian invasion, what Viktor Orban was doing and all in that space. So just wondering your thoughts around the current state of Hungary, Viktor Orban's leadership, and also if you want to, we'll definitely be talking about your family's history when Hungary at that time was under Russian domination and all in that space. So if you can definitely share with us just a little bit about your own thoughts around Hungary as it is now.
Mark, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it. My book is called 12 Bells to Freedom. And Viktor Orban is, I think, a very good leader. And his studies of Ukraine and all of the events that are occurring has given him a direction. And I think Hungarians trust his decisions. So I wanted to make that point. And I do also want to kind of explain the situation in Hungary from 1945 through 1956. And basically that period of time, we had Soviet control. So basically you had Yuri Andropov was the Russian ambassador to Hungary. And he was the messenger that received the Kremlin's 5-year plans and different things that were going on. And he would relay it to the Rákosi regime. And then they would implement those plans and directives to the people of Hungary. And in 1948, Rákosi had basically built the secret police, which is called the AVH. and their whole purpose was to bring fear to the country. So they didn't care about innocence or guilt. Well, guilt, of course, but innocence at all. So they would make examples out of innocent people, and they would arrest them. They would send them to the Andrassy Street, where the AVH was housed, and they would have prisons in the basements, and they would have torture areas, and they would make people that were arrested sign that they were guilty of such and such, whatever claim they came up with. So as that occurred, then the innocent people would say, no, I'm not going to sign it because I did nothing wrong. And those people were hung. So this is the type of fear tactics they would use to keep the country, the state, in submissive form. And the purpose for that is when 1945, when Russia occupied Hungary, they invoked a tax of 22% on Hungary. And that's based on the gross GNP, which would be an immediate avenue to poverty. So a number of things happened when that occurred. And one of the items that popped up was the black market. The black market created by all these suppressed oppressions, and basically had neighbor trading with neighbor just to make ends meet. And that was one of their tools. So getting back to our escape, over the period of time, the buildup of the 5-year plan never came true. So the people kind of got disenchanted with what was happening, what was being said, and you had the propaganda coming in from the radio, from the media, stating how what a wonderful world they lived in, and the people didn't agree with that. So the Hungarian students in Budapest, the engineering school, designed a 16-point manifesto that they presented, and they didn't think it was anything of importance, but the society of Hungary, the people rallied behind around that and said, everything that you're pointing out is true. So that is also in the book. And basically that created the working class people to join in, and then it developed into the revolution, and which only lasted a week because Andropov was called back, and Premier Khrushchev was the one that was meeting with him. So they decided to make an example out of Hungary. So no other Eastern Bloc country would ever attempt a revolution. And that's what they did. They delayed for 1 week, 7 days. And Khrushchev was kind of creating a system where he wanted to look like he was helping. But it took 7 days for the Siberian army to get down to Hungary. So he was making this up as he was going. And the final result was the 300 tanks rolled into Hungary and started to devastate the country, blowing buildings up, and the freedom fighters tried to fight as best they could, but they were outmanned. So they ended up falling 7 days later. And my father, who listened to Radio Free Europe because he understood that propaganda in the media in Hungary was controlled by the Russian occupation. So he developed his plan by listening to Radio Free Europe. And we decided to escape, or my parents decided to escape on November 20th of 1956. And we had 7 strangers that helped us along our path.
Wow.
And that path led from Pécs, Hungary, southern region of Hungary, to Sopron, Peresteg, which is adjacent to Austria.
Yeah.
So there was only one mode of transportation, and that traveled all the way up to Sopron. And 7 people that were helping us actually risked their lives because a communist member is an asset to the Communist Party. So when you have an asset trying to leave, that's why they had the border secure, and they were trying to shoot whoever was trying to escape. At night they would shoot flares in the air, and then basically machine gun anything that went down. So a lot of men, women, and children were killed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
our efforts proved differently with the assistance of the 7 people. I want to get to the title.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
Along those same lines and everything, I know one of the things that you had talked about in the press release that I got from your people and all along those lines is some of the parallels that you see between what's going on now then and what's going on in Ukraine, and even how you hope that people will want to listen to various sides of the argument and all along those lines. So I just wanted you to talk about that and why you think that that is important, because I do know that you had even talked about us listening to various sides and understanding the historical context. So I just want to hear your thoughts around that.
Right. When Russia occupied Hungary, they introduced socialism. Mm-hmm. And socialism was on the agenda to be voted for. And basically what happened was the people voted it down. So a year after that vote, they threw out the vote and had another one. So they would have like two bins to put your vote in. The Russian bin and then the people's bin. So they had a way of tracking the people that were on a hit list, not necessarily to be killed, but subversive type lists. What happened was that ushered in communism. And then communism is when they confiscated companies. Teachers were arrested, media people were arrested, politicians were arrested. Many of them were deported to Siberia. So that happens. And when people think, oh, socialism is so great, I get this free, that free, you're giving away your freedom is what's happening. So that kind of is what's not happening currently, but introduction is starting to happen. And also the point of propaganda. I encourage all young generation folks to focus on a number of media points. Study the media. Come to your own conclusions. Don't take one side or another. When you follow that premise, then what's happening is you're understanding the truth. And you don't need to hear propaganda because propaganda lies. It's not true. And when we escaped, my father decided to listen to Radio Free Europe and not the Hungarian media. So he had an outline as to how to go about this life's journey to freedom. Yeah. So that is very apparent today, that we need to study. We don't need to automatically take sides. Some people are taking sides and demonstrating, and they're asked, well, why are you doing this? They don't have an answer. So those folks need to study and come up with the truth of the matter.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. What is your own take about, because we actually have Sasha will be joining us very shortly, a gentleman that is in Canada, but he is of Ukrainian descent and at one point had served in the Russian army and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your take on the war in Ukraine and just your own observations as to how it may parallel with what your family went through in Hungary.
Well, I think the Ukraine situation is kind of paralleling Hungary. It's all the oppression is coming. They were a sovereign country, and for Russia to come in and oppress them and start this war, I think they have a right to fight for their freedom, and there's a right for the United Nations and the U.S. to support them in their battle. So freedom is not free, folks. You have to uh, watch watch and learn, and I've got a saying that I use that always remember freedom is not free. You have to earn it.
Yeah,
So
that makes
that's the point.
that makes a lot of sense in that sense. Before I bring in Rick Rosner and Sasha, and they may have questions for you as well, could you tell a little bit about what 12 Bells of Freedom means? Because you titled the book 12 Bells of Freedom. So could you
Yeah,
explain?
when I was in the Navy, I would take leave and go home. All throughout my educational career, teachers would hear my story, and they'd always say, Les, you've got to write this story. This is something that people will really appreciate. And I just wanted to fit in as a youngster. And my brothers and I, we found our niche as athletes. So that's how we, kind of fit in, because when you're strange, you're new, you're speaking a different language, kids can be cruel. So you always want to try to fit in. So I would take leave, go home. We'd sit at the kitchen table. I'd pull out my cassette player, and they gave me the memoirs of the book on cassette tape. So I went ahead, and this was back in 2018. I pulled it all out, did all the research of the time for politics and government and AVH and Cardinal Mancenti. Cardinal Mancenti was the Catholic cardinal who tried to fight for separation of church and state, and was on a St. Mary's pilgrimage, and went to every city that he could go to. This was back in from 1945 to 1948, and my grandmother went to that one of his sermons. And for many years, I was thinking, well, what am I going to call this book? And I didn't have an answer at the time. But as I was studying Cardinal Mancenti, he had given a sermon, and at the end, he noticed the Russian and Hungarian soldiers on perimeter because they were trying to arrest him. So he stated that as long as his countrymen are held prisoner within the borders of Hungary, the church bells will not ring until his brothers and sisters are free. And we crossed into Austria at 12 noon on November 22nd, and the church bells were ringing 12 for us.
Well,
So that's how I came up with 12 bells to freedom.
okay, just really quickly, like I said, I'm going to bring in Rick and Sasha as well. I know a lot of times when people come, particularly to the United States, because we're even seeing the conversation around immigrants now and everything, they come into tight knit communities. I know you said you're in St. Louis now, but I know that in New York and even in, I went to school in Milwaukee, there was an active German community. I would say there was an active Polish community as well. So I was just wondering, how much was that helping you when you moved into the area? Was there an active, and I don't know if you've always lived in St. Louis, was there an active Hungarian community that welcomed you?
Yeah, actually, we came in through New York, and we were stationed in Camp Kilmer, New York and New Jersey, and then from there you had sponsorships. So my father was sponsored by the Rotary Club in Upper Michigan, called Ishpeming, Michigan, Upper Peninsula, and so he was there, and we received again Hungarian. A club that was there to help us as well. And they found my father found a job in Austin Western in Aurora, Illinois, 40 miles west of Chicago. So that's where we moved to Aurora, Illinois. And from there, my brothers and I grew up. One more point I want to make. Walking through the forest of Chopron, 2 hours, ages 5, 7, and 9, we were completely quiet for 2 hours. So I kind of tell my grandkids that, boy, how loud you guys are, I don't know if you would have survived. So that's a joke, but you get my point, I think.
Yeah, definitely had to be quiet in order to avoid the snipers and all along those lines. I'll bring in Rick and everything, and also bring in Sasha Starr. But yeah, we've got the gentleman that has written the book 12 Bells of Freedom from Hungary, and it talks about his journey with his parents as they were escaping the Russian tyranny and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, definitely they may have some questions for you in addition and everything along those lines. But could you show the picture of your parents and talk about what kind of work they were doing and what drove them, in addition to wanting to escape Russia, to leave Hungary?
Yeah, actually, my father worked at a he was a pilot in World War II. So his focus was he wanted to be an airline pilot, and he was blacklisted by the Russians. So he could not pursue the career he was looking for. So he had to work as a truck driver for the lumber company. For He did work for an airport for a while. He was the manager for the airport until an incident occurred, and that's also in the book. And then he was framed, and so on. So there was a court hearing on that. So all of that is listed and noted. And then he ended up working in a mine uh, for I think it was a coal mine at the time. So he could not have the quality of life that he always wanted. So that weighed heavy on his mind. But one thing about when you're under oppression, families are your world. You might have an outside world, but within the shelter of your home, the family love supported all of us, and that means our grandparents and relatives were all supportive. So that helped a great deal for my parents.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What kind of work did your mom do at that time? And I did see Rick had a
My mom
question.
was a housewife, but she had to also back then in the 50s, early 50s. She also worked at the mine, and she would handle all of the hard hats with the lights and make sure it was recharged and all that. So she did all that as well. And so yeah, their life journey was a hard one. It really was.
Sounds like it. Rick, you had a question?
Yeah, once you guys made it out, did your dad ever get to work as a pilot?
No, my father, once we got out and came to the United States, um, he was so appreciative of the freedoms that he received that his language barrier was an issue. I mean, he still kept flying. I mean, he ended up many years later having his own airplane, and he would fly with my brother and I on occasion. But no, he ended up working for, if you're familiar with Austin Western Clark equipment, those are heavy crane operations, and he was a welder for that. He was very mechanical, and before he became a pilot, he was an aviation repair person. So he was set up for that type of uh, knowledge, and you had to have that experience to be able to kick off a new life in a new area with a secure position. So that's what he did.
What message would you give? Because a lot of people, I see that Sasha's got a question as well, but what message would you give to immigrants? Because we're hearing a lot of conversation around immigrants coming from the southern border because of what's going on in Mexico and Latin America, and even some that are coming from the Eastern European blocs like Ukraine and other places. So I was just wondering, what message would you give as one that went through the process of coming across Ellis Allen to those that are immigrants that are trying to come to the United States? I know that our network founder has talked about this notion of even having immigrants pay a fee to come across the country and all along those lines. So, and he may join the conversation later as well. But what message would you give to immigrants that want to come to the United States?
Well, again, using my parents as the example, they were so appreciative. If you could understand arrival being processed through New York, we were refugees, and they said, the people there said, well, we want to change your first names so that in the melting pot theory, you would be more accepted with an Americanized name. So my name Laszlo turned into Leslie, and my brother Bela turned into Bill, which he was quite offensive because Billy in Hungarian means toilet. So we had some concerns there for him, but And Josef, that's my older brother. No problem there. It's Joseph. So yeah. But the people today, I think are very appreciative that they have arrived. But where the rub is they did not come through on a legal path. But still, they need to be appreciative and to do the due diligence that they would need to do to show uh, the capabilities of their profession and life, life's journey going forward. But I do want to mention one concern. Uh, like communism, they control all the people, so all the people become assets. So a communist government would want to make sure that those assets do not escape. So that was the reason for, or the heavy patrols and guards keeping people in Hungary. So now that you have these communist countries, people coming in that have been released by the government, that's a warning sign for me anyway. My opinion is that there's ulterior motives by releasing those folks into the United States. So that needs to be controlled and monitored, in my opinion.
That makes sense. Sasha, you had a question. I saw that your hand was up.
Yes, Laszlo, it was great to listen to your story. And about Hungary, I have one big question which I cannot find the answer. If you take the map of Eastern Europe, and starting with Poland was dominated by Russia, and then it was trying to get its freedom. It failed with several wars. We know the history of that. On the other hand, for example, Serbia and others, they were under Turks for centuries. And so many countries, like even Czechs and so on, they all have their grievances, except Hungary, because Hungary was a part, significant part of Austro-Hungarian Empire. Hungarians were integrated in European culture. If you remember names of Ferenc Liszt, Bela Bartok, and many other well noted, they were not even Hungarian, uh, the writers and scientists, and just name it. They were Europeans, they were even world class performers, like in the case of Liszt, or composers and writers, and just name it. So what's happened? How the Russians were able to indoctrinate and control the Hungary, except for a brute force, because there is no commonality in upbringing of Hungarians, their traditions, the language, the culture, the religion. There is nothing in common. So how dare Russians were trying to implant this brutal model of their communism into a country like Hungary? For example, Austria escaped that fate thanks to the West. Why the West wouldn't help Hungary to escape it as well?
Well, it's I can tell you that during the Hungarian Revolution, there were media folks on air pleading for assistance from the West, and they stayed on air until the Russians troops came in and shot them. So they the desire for assistance was there. They were trying to appeal to the United Nations during that week of freedom, but of course that's not enough time to accomplish any of a tremendous task like that. But as far as controlling the people and the historical references, Russia tried to change that. So they would teach Russian accomplishments. They would try to replace Hungarian writers and musicians with Russian type influences. So they were controlling it through education. So if the educational process is changed, the young folks are hearing this new history, and then they will also, I'm not saying all of them would believe it, because when they go home, obviously the parents would kind of help them as to the historical reference of Hungary. And you're right, Austro-Hungary was a big position in Europe. And after the First World War, that Hungary was reduced in size and displaced over 300,000 folks into Yugoslavia. To it just shrunk, and Ukraine and all these other countries picked up a lot of Hungarian folks.
See,
So,
because what I think is that what Russia is trying to do now in Ukraine, which is horrible thing, but at least they have some slogans like Russians and Ukrainians, it's one people. Why you are killing your own people? Nobody knows why, but that's what's happening. So there were some cultural identities, quite common, language similars, and so on, but not with Hungary. The Hungaries and Russians, they were miles apart. There was absolutely nothing in common. And it seems to me that communism or socialism, which sometimes is very difficult to distinguish one from another, but still it has its expansionist modum operandi, which means without expansion, they seems to me cannot exist. So they would go to far countries like Cuba, or even they were trying to be, and even today they're active in Africa, but not for socialist ideas, rather for commercial reasons. But still, and they always have to expand, whether it's Ukraine or Cuba, it doesn't matter, or Hungary, so last century. And I don't know, hopefully this Ukrainian war will end this imperialist.
Sasha, there's one point that I think Russia was looking at. Now, Hungary is strategically located. So Hungary is surrounded by 7 countries. So as a strategic point, that could be one of the reasons why Russia went into Hungary, so they would have a better position in the Eastern Bloc countries.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything.
Point.
Just really quickly and everything, Les, just out of curiosity, because a lot of times people are very much interested in their cultures. It seems like you've written this amazing book and everything, but I'm just wondering, how do you manage to celebrate your Hungarian background? Like you said, you were literally a youngster when you left, and that you left with your parents, and I'm assuming that your parents may have passed on by now and everything, but they may still be living and everything. But I was just wondering, how do you celebrate your background? I know some people are very much into Hungarian foods or Hungarian even music and culture, but I was just wondering, how do you choose to celebrate your heritage?
I do, and I belong to a number of Hungarian clubs, and that's not just St. Louis. I'm into a number of, even a Canadian Hungarian club and Florida Hungarian clubs, and so I'm trying to keep that home country live and going forward. And here in St. Louis, my wife and I belong to the St. Mary's of Victory's Church. And there's a lot of folk, well, it's reduced in size now because the elderly people are, unfortunately passing on. But I'm trying to get the youth, the descendants of those folks, to also keep coming to the church. And I think it's important because when you study history, you know who you are, where you came from, and your relatives, your descendants, as you descend, to present. You've got a historical history, and you need to know your family's history, because that tells you who you are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I saw Rick had a question for you, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
having escaped from a communist regime, how do you feel when terms like communist and socialist are thrown around in American politics, where the right accuses the left of being socialists.
I look at that, and all of you, your life's journeys, think of this. The folks that escaped, like what Ukraine is going through, you're walking the walk, you're talking the talk. Now, people that are saying one side or another have not walked that journey. They haven't done that. So they don't know. They just hear this philosophy and they think, oh, well, I've got an opinion on that, but they've never confronted oppression. They don't know what that does to people, and how ingrained it is for freedom, because freedom is the beacon that everybody goes for, especially when you're oppressed.
Just
So,
really,
so go ahead.
just really quickly along those same lines and everything. I was wondering how important do you think it is? Because the other thing that Rick was possibly alluding to is a lot of times people attack the institutions. Because you mentioned the church bells that you were hearing. I think they were Catholic churches, if I remember correctly. You
Correct.
could say a cardinal and all along those lines. But even in the current U.S. politics, we're hearing people that are attacking the schools, attacking the churches, attacking a number of other institutions as well. So how important was the institutional connection to Hungary in your own struggles and in your own families? Because it sounds to me like what I'm hearing that y'all were a devoutly religious family and all along those lines. So how important were those institutions to your own road to freedom?
Right. When you're going back in time, Russia tries to separate church and state. That's what Cardinal Vincenti was all about. And he wanted to keep the faith going strong. And so obviously there was a reason for Russia wanting to arrest Cardinal Vincenti as the enemy of the state. And they did that successfully in 1948. And he was held prisoner until the revolution, when he was released by during that 7-day period and found asylum in the U.S. Embassy. So it's a situation where if you eliminate faith, you're going to turn neighbor against neighbor, because the cohesiveness of a society depends on faith. Depends on, I think, religion helps, because then now you're going to help. I'm going to help Sasha. I'm going to help Rick. I'm going to help Mark, and I'm going to help Nick. So it's a cohesive process that works, and that can only be done through faith. And when you have organizations trying to eliminate that, I know my wife was a teacher for 28 years, and history is being reduced. They're trying not to tell the history as to the new generation, and the new generation needs to know the history. Sasha,
And it's not only history, it's all history of arts, whether it's music or anything. It's all based, if you take all the Western music, it's all based on the Christian ideas. Without that, you wouldn't have Michelangelo, you wouldn't have Raphael or Leonardo da Vinci, you wouldn't have Bach. You wouldn't have Ferenc Liszt, you wouldn't have Beethoven, you wouldn't have anything.
Exactly.
There would be no culture. There would be just people would be like some sort of animals. But with this, you have people. Now, I wanted to ask you this. If you take Austro-Hungarian Empire going to Free Hungary, going to Second World War and Soviet domination, this some form of the, in Russia we were told that in Hungary there is not real socialism, there is a goulash socialism. There was a joke. I was serving in the Soviet army in the 70s, because Ukraine was part of Soviet Union and it was a mandatory service. So the rule number one, first shoot, then ask the questions. So that's how Russians used to operate, and still operating the same way. So then we're going into 90s, freedom, extension to NATO, to European Union, and now it's coming to Viktor Orban. How all this fits into your understanding of Hungarian mentality?
well, In Hungary, you still have the Communist Party, and you still have the conservative parties in play, and they're always fighting against each other as well. So it's a situation where the people are looking for the proper leadership, and I think Victor is kind of not oppressed. He's attacked a number of times, but I think he is a person that is fair. I think he knows the direction of Hungary, and he's trying to keep that position going forward. And I believe that leaders like him can really help in the United Nations going forward. You can't just have a party controlling a direction, and we're seeing that. We're seeing parties trying to control a certain ideal, and I think that necessarily is not the correct road to take. I think what you need to do is to study the whole sphere of the issue or the problem, and come to a satisfactory conclusion for the people. So
yeah. Just really quick, I've got a lighthearted question, and I did see your hands up, Rick. But it's actually two lighthearted questions, but because it's a very deep conversation and everything. But one, were you fortunate enough, because some people love their culture so much that they want to keep it in their romantic life as well. So were you fortunate, because you are married, you mentioned your wife and everything, to marry a fellow Hungarian, or did you marry somebody of a different descent? And also, what is your favorite Hungarian dish?
Hungarian goulash is my favorite.
Okay.
My mom really knows how to make it. So my wife has her recipes, so every time we have that, I think of my mom. So that's pretty good. But yeah, I think that the Mark, your first part of your question again, please.
Was whether you were fortunate enough to marry a fellow Hungarian, or did you marry somebody of another descent?
My wife, Elizabeth Ziegler, was her maiden name, but her grandmother was Hungarian. So I didn't know it at the time when I was, engaged to her, but I visited the family and got to meet her grandmother, and we spoke in Hungarian, which was quite nice. So yeah, it's kind of nice to fall into the same nationality that you are, and she was like the second generation. So that's great. I mean, so that adds to my holding my home country, close to me. So
yeah.
So, as you know, in America, we're underinformed about the rest of the world. But what we do hear about Orban is that he's a strong man, that he's got authoritarian tendencies. Are you saying he's not as bad as we get told in America?
Well, I think Orban is a good diplomat. So you're going to have the other side attacking him all the time, and just like here. In our country, you have parties attacking the other party, and they're coming up with whatever agenda they want to bring out. But again, the new generations need to study. They should not listen to one network. They should kind of do homework and check a number of them, so they have an independent point of view and not a propaganda point of view.
So where do you get your news from? When you're looking, when you want news about Europe, where do you turn to?
I listen to the Australian news. I listen to some of the other, naturally on social media and stuff. I'll listen to some of the points, but I try not to make a judgment until I fully understand, what I believe to be the truth.
Nick talks about this group.
Have you been back to Hungary since you left? Have you been back?
Oh yeah, my My mom passed away in 2018, and so we had made a number of trips to see her and the relatives, and to me it's a big joy because I get to visit my homeland, visit my relatives, and I appreciate all of them.
That makes a lot of sense. Nick talks about this notion of a group on social media, I think it's on Facebook, called Understanding China and all along those lines. So I was also wondering, is there any Facebook groups that are in Facebook or in LinkedIn or a number of other places that are strongly Hungarian based that maybe even Pod TV needs to consider sending not just this material, but other material too as well? So I just wondering, how strong is the social media presence of Hungarian citizens?
I'm actually part of the Hungarian club in Pécs, Hungary, and well, it's the social club. Facebook is an example.
Mhm.
So you can hear a different city, what city's doing, and some current event stuff, and so yeah, it keeps you informed as to what's happening, which I kind of like. So yeah, being part of a number of clubs that are Hungarian based gives you an understanding of what is happening in their area, and perhaps there's some kind of a club show or presentation that you can attend. Yeah, there's a variety of different things that can happen, when you're part of a sorted club where you're not just with one, you're with a number of them.
Yeah, Nick may have another question for you as well, but just out of curiosity, because the Paris Olympics is about to take place, and we know that the world community will be looking at the Paris Olympics. Is there any particular Hungarian sport that we need to pay attention to that the Hungarians may do well in, or do you even follow sports in that sense? Because I do know that a lot of times people start following their nations of interest during the Olympics. So I was wondering if there is any Hungarian athletes that we need to pay attention to, or a specific Hungarian sport.
Well, my niche is soccer. So I was a soccer star in college and set some scoring records back in '71 that still stand today. That was Aurora College. Now it's Aurora University. And so I love to watch Olympic soccer and even Premier Soccer in UK. And I'm a fan of Manchester City, so.
Soccer is my passion too, and I'll tell you, before Olympics, watch the European Championship.
Yeah.
And Hungary is in very tough group, but you know what? I believe they can advance from that group.
I think they can too. They have years ago been involved in that, so I think they can return to that stage. But to answer your question, Mark, I think the first gold medal for Hungary was fencing. So I think that's going to be another good one to watch to see if they can still keep that professional winning process going forward.
So it's been more than 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union. Has Hungary fully recovered from the years of is it a fun place to visit? It is.
And if you've never taken the Budapest cruise, please do. The whole city is lit up. It's just a brilliant attraction to actually go and see. It's wonderful. We've been there a number of times, and I think Budapest and when you take the tour of Budapest, it's just like, in my opinion, your malls are the same in Budapest as you have here in the United States. So they've really developed, and for many, many years when they were under Russian rule, they were kind of like on the leading edge of Western business and involvement. So Hungary was, I think, one of the blessed countries that under the occupation, they had Western ideals.
Hey, before we get out of here, and I did see, I think Sasha had a quick question as well, because we only got a few more minutes to go and everything. But before we get out, as anybody that knows this network knows, I'm a big fan of culture, meaning both dance and music and all along those lines. So I was wondering, is there any Hungarian music, either traditionally or currently, that you are a big fan of, or any Hungarian performance artists that you are a big fan of as well? Because I'm a big fan of culture, and I just wondered if there's something that, like Rick was asking, that I should be paying attention to from a cultural standpoint.
Well, to be honest, I haven't really followed the current trends in music in Hungary. But as Sasha had reported, I'm familiar with Franz Liszt and all those, and actually have records of that my parents had given me. So I have that, and so I appreciate listening to the older theme songs, and some are excellent. I mean, they're very, very good, and brings back the home country to my door.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that some of the greatest Hungarian music, like Hungarian dances, were written by great German composer Brahms, Johannes Brahms. But he's been in Hungary several times, in Budapest, and of course he was a student of Ferenc Liszt, and so he had appreciation for Hungarian music and some of this greatest music. If you remember Hungarian dance number 5, da, 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 da. This music by Johannes Brahms.
Yeah, great music and everything. By the way,
I would like to plug my. You were talking about dance. My cousin Anita Shuhaida, she traveled and did the historical Hungarian dances.
Oh, wow.
So
this is also where you need to plug your book again.
Yeah, definitely plug the book again, and also if you'll let folks know your
I got
own
it right
book.
here, and that is actually my parents' photo.
Oh, wow.
And their names are Irene Menarath Shuhaida and Lajos Shuhaida. And it's called
Let's just
12 Bells to Freedom, the Shuhaida story.
Gotcha. Definitely, you said it's available on Amazon, and as Nick said when he was here, we'll be definitely putting it on our Amazon bookstore here. That's part of the Pod TV and everything. But earlier at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about your dad and his being a pilot. Did you follow in those footsteps, or what work did you go into? Because you are definitely of a certain age and everything. But I was wondering, what was your own life journey, and did you follow in your parents' footsteps?
Well, what I did is out of Aurora College, I was drafted. So that was during the tail end of Vietnam. So I decided, well, I'm just going to enlist. So I enlisted into the U.S. Navy. And I chose, like my father, he was a brilliant mechanic, aircraft mechanic before he became a pilot. I decided I was going to go into air squadron support. So I was in a purchasing environment, and that led me to working for McDonnell Douglas, and then McDonnell Douglas became Boeing, and then they had layoffs before they had the Boeing connection. So I went into the chemical industry, and right now I have my own distribution company. And we're talking about having ties to homeland. I was importing Hungarian wine and also had a distribution side for chemicals. And Ukraine might be interested in this. One of the new technologies that I'm presenting and getting some good replies back on is a new green technology that protects, retards, and suppresses fire. And it's safe for humans, animals, and environment. It's called Komodo.
Like a drone?
And it even comes in, I think I have it here, as a matter of fact. It even comes in, this is a 4-ounce spray can, and it comes in 16-ounce spray cans. So we had some presentations to government, military. So when you get into these firefights, and I think Ukraine might be a good example, you have a system that you can put out the fire at its infancy without harming anyone. It has no PFOS or PFAS in it. So that's cancerous causing agents. So this is totally green, and it does the job very, very well, better than, and it was actually designed to be used for a remedy for wildfires.
Oh, wow.
It's USDA approved, so it's ready to go. Any state or country can use it, but I think UN would have to also test it. So at this point, we're unsure about European.
If you'd like, you can send on my email information about this product. I will be able to plug it in, see if there will be some interest.
Okay.
Good and everything. Just really quickly, because later on we're going to end and everything. But at 1 o'clock, Sasha will be doing. He does several shows. He does Ukraine, Russia, and China on Tuesday and Friday. But he'll be doing Modern Investment at 1 o'clock, which is his investment show, and all along those lines. So just really quickly, as we're walking out the door and everything, are you engaged in the investment space? Because I know that Sasha is very much involved and has been making quite a bit of decent returns off of NVIDIA. We know that the other company that you mentioned that you worked for has been in trouble, and sometimes their stock has plummeted, that being Boeing and everything. But I'm just wondering if you have done anything in the investment space, or is that something that you have been interested in less as well?
No, I haven't, not at this time, but I've spent, over, I guess, $800,000 on investing into the Komodo product. So it's been going on for 6 years, and finally, people are starting to turn their heads.
Are you trying to get on a Shark Tank with it?
No, not really, because
that would be worth a shot. They love entrepreneurial efforts like this, and they like you're in the sweet spot for you've been going for 6 years, but now you're in your expansion phase. That's when they like people to come on that show.
Right. But I think what's happening now, especially Australia, they had a wildfire, and so did Canada. They had a wildfire that almost reached Sydney. So it was huge. And the product they were currently using, which was the incumbent product, and I don't want to mention the name, but it didn't work. I mean, it was a retardant only. And when you have these wildfires, the track goes like this, and then they would drop that material, and then the fire would jump from treetop to treetop and keep on going.
They would love this product because you've got a consumer part for like kitchen fires, and then you have an industrial part for governments who are trying to put out huge fires.
Now the K500C, which is USDA approved, and is the formulation in the 911 fire Komodo 911, is class A, B, C, D, and K. So it even puts out electrical fire.
Oh, wow.
So if you catch it at the infancy, you can spray it and put it out. So a lot of these electric vehicles would be well protected if they had that in their glove compartment.
That makes a lot of sense. As we get ready to go out the door and everything, if you can tell folks once again about the book, how they can get the book. Like I said, it will be available on our bookstore. And also if they, like Sasha, are interested in potentially getting the book, but also investing in your product, how they can reach you and reach your company as well. And then after we do that, we'll have the same video that got us in getting us out. But I was very fascinated learning about the history, both your own history as well as the history of Hungary. And I think that even Sasha, he doesn't always like all my guests, but I think he liked this one and everything along those lines. Yes, I'm teasing you, Sasha, and everything in that space. But definitely if you'll share a little bit about your ways that you can be reached.
Okay. It's the book is called 12 Bells to Freedom, the Shahida story, and it's available on Amazon.com. And my company name is Laszlo Corporation, which I named it after my true name. And we're Email address is the shuhaidal@gmail.com or shuhaidal@laslochem.com. And yeah, we're here. I'm the type of person that's on cutting edge. I like to see new technology, and the Komodo product that I'm working with now, I'm partnered with the manufacturer, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to go to Shark Tank, because I'm kind of on the distributor side. So I feel that my effort is helping, and I think that one day Komodo is going to be a common name, and it's going to when the airdrop starts occurring, they're going to see, because it will coat the vegetation, and when the heat hits it, it emits carbon dioxide and nitrogen. So when that process takes place, it robs the fire of oxygen and it stops. And when you see that on video happening, that's going to be the oh my goodness moment for people to say, wow, this product and its green technology works.
Sounds amazing. Well, I've definitely enjoyed our conversation. You're going to get us on out of here. Like I said, at 1 o'clock, we'll be having a modern investment with Sasha, and that'll definitely be coming on. I think he's got Milan, and who is of Siberian descent, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines, and Jim Eade, who is over there in California. And I think all three of them are, matter of fact, I know they are, because they just did a chess tournament, are chess fans as well, and all along those lines. So it would be definitely great seeing them in their conversation around investment. But right now, we're getting ready to get out of here. We may have another guest tomorrow. I've got to look at my list and all along those lines. But this has been a great conversation, and I look forward to having more world conversations tomorrow in the space where we'll be talking about a number of world issues on both shows, both a World Edition and World Politics. Unfortunately, schedules got in the way yesterday, so we ran a rerun, but it will be back in its regularly scheduled time at 5 o'clock on Thursday and all along those lines. But definitely get ready to get out of here, and it's been great having you on, Les, and hopefully we'll get you back on in the near future as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Send me an email if you would. I'll keep in touch.
Get my mail from Mark, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay.
I'll exchange those emails with you.
Bye-bye.